Golly, wow. Right, okay. Anyone out there heard of the National Trust? Yeah? Have a few hands. Okay, second question. Anyone here a member of the National Trust? And look really, oh, brilliant. Fantastic, thank you. Now, because I know the answer to this one, anyone out here a volunteer for the National Trust? Oh, yes, 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 fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh, well, that's a great help, actually. I know you're all clued up. Now, I was a bit daunted when I was first asked here to speak. What a prestigious event and this huge and accomplished audience. I just thought, what could I possibly say to add to this gathering? But actually, I didn't have to think for very long. Because while we're a charity, and as a charity completely independent of government, and no grant or subsidy for our core work, the National Trust operates as a business that can stand here as proudly as any of you. Let me give you some figures to illustrate that. £380 million turnover, more than 3.5 million members, and I still pinch myself when I said 3.5 million members, 5,000 staff, 50,000 volunteers, about 5,000 buildings with an insured value of about 6 billion, and we only insure for replaceable value, the precious things that are irreplaceable. Many of our 11,000 oil paintings we can't insure. More than 300 great houses and gardens like Montacute here. 650,000 acres of countryside, including 1,200 farms. 15 million visits to our pay-for-entry properties, and that's not counting more than 100 million people who visit our coast and countryside completely free of charge. 300 retail and catering outlets, 360 holiday cottages, a magazine with a print run of 1.8 million and the fourth highest readership in the country, 707 miles of coastline. I could just go on and on. So my contention here is that the National Trust is a very successful business, but one that's also delivering phenomenal public benefit. In fact, I like to think we're in the love mark category. And I think it's pretty astonishing to think what's been achieved since we were established in 1895 with one property and £10. Now, our founders, and here they are, these three indomitable people, Octavia Hill, Canon Hardwicke Rawnsley, and Robert Hunter, they were Victorian philanthropists. They unfashionably, at the time, stood up for beauty. It was a time of rampant industrialization, and their ambition was to protect what they saw was being swept away in the name of progress. Beautiful buildings, land, and coastline. They were far-sighted and visionary people, and they persuaded Parliament, which I don't think anyone could do today, by the way, to give their tiny charity unique powers, which were set out in the 1907 National Trust Act. Powers to promote the permanent preservation for the benefit of the nation of land and property of historic interest or natural beauty. What we call today looking after special places forever for everyone. So, while we are a significant business and we apply business disciplines to our work, as I'll explain, there's an extra challenge. We are a business plus. We do so much more. For one thing, we are totally dependent on the loyalty and the support of our 3.5 million members. And we exist to champion a cause that's not only 100 years old, but must see and plan far into the future, indeed in perpetuity, because we hold our land and property inalienably. We cannot dispose of it. So I thought you might like to know something about the challenges and the opportunities that creates. Now, getting the job of Director General of the National Trust in 2000 was literally, for me, the job of my dreams. I joined the National Trust when I was still a student, and I first got involved as a volunteer myself when I was in my 20s, very young for the National Trust. as a member of a regional committee. But working for the National Trust in the top job was something else altogether. But let me tell you, it's not just a job. The National Trust is, a bit like the Albert Hall actually, or the BBC, it's a national institution. And the thing about national institutions is that everybody owns them, and everybody has a view on them. Now that's what I call stakeholder management on a grand scale. And the other thing about national institutions is that they're quite hard to change. Indeed, one of the reasons they are national institutions is because they're seen as unchanging. Now either they're working, or they seem to be working, in which case everyone says if it ain't broke, don't fix it, don't change a thing, or they're not working, and in which case everyone has a different view about what needs to change. Now the National Trust has both of those writ large. Now when I arrived on the 1st of January 2001, the Trust wasn't broke, but there was a desperate sense that it needed fixing. Because although in many, many ways it was hugely successful, it felt old-fashioned, it felt out of touch, and its structures and its management were certainly outdated and inefficient. So the years since I arrived have in effect been a massive change programme, first focusing on structural change and now much more on cultural change. There were 5 main elements to the structural changes, and none of them were easy. Now the first was formalising the management structure into a matrix structure and reorganising all our expert functions and their relationship with our massive operational commitments. Now those had all grown over the years like Topsy, and they span a huge range of specialisations, from art and butterfly experts to, of course, marketing, finance and HR, and the kinds of things you'd expect to see. Second was changing our regional structure to match everybody else's. We had lovely regions that were called things like Mercia and Severn, but it meant nothing whatever to our partners and to the people we needed to work with. Third, and this was very exciting, was relocating our central office out of London and bringing it together with 4 other offices to establish a new central office. Here it is in Swindon. It's called Helis. Now that, I can tell you, was not one of my most popular decisions. But with the commissioning of this fabulous, green, very efficient building, we overcame the sceptics, and we've got now over 450 staff under one roof for the first time. Fourth was overhauling the finances, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And last but not least was transforming the governance of the National Trust from a very outdated, slightly, I have to say, old boys network feel, with a trustee body of 52. And I don't know how many of you have got a trustee, a board, I should say, of 52. That was quite interesting. To a new structure, which is now held up as best practice in the charity world, and most importantly for me, has a fully functioning and very effective trustee board of 12. Now, I just want to focus briefly on the finances because in a sense they're symbolic of the changes we went through. The National Trust had operated for years on the old-fashioned good principle of prudence. We didn't spend money until it was in the bank, and we were very careful to meet all our obligations. But when I arrived, it was a time of great expansion, and our demands, frankly, were beginning to run away with us. But we hadn't invested in critical organisational infrastructure. And actually, we didn't have the management information to know what we were spending and how we were controlling money. And that was pretty unacceptable at the beginning of the 21st century. Now, as you've seen from the Act, we have to invest to meet those obligations literally forever. So we calculate that we need to generate £1 of income for every 80p we spend. That's equivalent to a net gain of 20%. Now this involved lifting the operating surplus from about 4 million to over 20 million in 3 years. And that was a hugely challenging target for the National Trust, but we more than did it by 2007 through a mixture of cost control and income generation. This is the net incoming resources slide, which shows a fantastic curve, and coming up is the net gain slide. Now, I would just emphasise the challenge here. National Trust staff don't get out of bed in the morning for money. They actually are there driven by their heart, which is a wonderful thing. So in the process, we had to introduce new financial systems, we centralised our finances, provided proper management information to our staff throughout the country, and established a completely new financial regime across the organisation. And now that we've got to our 20% net gain, we are going to stay there, whatever happens. And so, having secured that, it allows us to move on. Because although finance is absolutely essential to what we do, it isn't what we do. And that may be a difference from how business perceives itself. So built on that success and that real transformation, our new strategy broadens our focus to a genuinely triple bottom line. People, whether that's our staff, our volunteers, and all our supporters, conservation and the environment, and of course, finances. But that's a rounded approach, vital to accurately reflect that core purpose you saw earlier, and to enthuse our staff. So our challenge now is cultural change. We've got good structures, we've got good governance. What we do is good, but we now need to address the way we work as an organisation, and in particular, to deepen people's relationships with us. Because, and this is something you've heard so many times this morning already, society is changing, and we need to change to meet those demands. Look at this. 50 years ago, it was enough just to open our doors. Today's visitors, I can tell you, are a lot more challenging, discerning, and questioning than that. And I think I'm echoing Kevin Roberts here. People today have, frankly, a huge range of choices about how they spend their time and their money. And if they don't find what they want, they can just walk away. To sustain that support for the Trust, on which we're so dependent to maintain our obligations and fulfill our core purpose, we have to change. We have to meet people's needs. And I describe this in very simple terms. I describe it as the difference between an arms-closed approach, where you kind of put your arms around something and you say, yeah, we've got that, we're looking after our properties, we know what we're doing, yes, we'll let you in and we'll tell you all about it, but, you know, they're ours, to what I call an arms-open approach, where we're saying, this is just an amazing, inspiring cause. We want to hear what you think about it. We want you to help us shape the agenda. We want to know what you think. We want to know what you enjoy. And that's a really big cultural shift. It's absolutely vital, but it's big. And it's not just engaging people for engagement's sake. It is engaging them through our very cause, the conservation of our properties and our wider responsibilities. I'll just give you one tiny example. At Cotillion, which is the most beautiful manor house down on the Devon-Cornwall border, we prepare a flower garland every year which is hung in the property, and people come from miles around to see it. Now, the staff used to make that garland in their lunchtime, after hours, you know, tucked away in the back of the property. But now our visitors make the garland as part of their visits coming to the property. They're part of it. They're joining in. They feel part of that fantastic conservation work. And we're also doing engagement through an explicit commitment to the environment. And in many, many ways, I think this is the 21st century equivalent of that founding purpose that I described earlier. In 1895, rampant industrialization was swamping beauty. Today, it's the consequences of that industrialization which threaten the very planet itself. And for the National Trust, there's no choice about whether to be involved or not. We are. Already our properties are experiencing the impact of climate change. Just let me give you a few examples. This is a flood at the Vine, these torrential downpours that come out of nowhere and cause dramatic impacts. That was last July. Lawns that with hot summers, and there was a very hot summer in 2006, and you remember before that, which mean that can we maintain our beautiful gardens in the way that they are seen to be, you know, part of the quintessential National Trust. The textiles that used to be mercifully bug-free in the winter when cold winters killed them all off, the bugs now live all year and munch through our precious medieval textiles all year round. And of course the dramatic storms which are changing the face of our coastline. Our coastline is rapidly eroding, moving, and certainly facing dramatic changes there. And it's because of the nature, the scale of our land and property holdings that I sometimes call us the nation's canary. You know, little canary in the miner's lantern. If the canary tips over, everyone goes, oh, right, better do something about it. Because we notice, because of the scale of our obligations, we notice the cumulative impacts of changes before others do. So like everyone else, we have got to put our own house in order, and that's what we're doing. Just one example, this is Gibson Mill. It's an 18th century cotton mill tucked away in the woodlands near Hebden Bridge. This is 100% sustainable. There are no external sources of supply to this property except for a telephone line. And so it's being driven by water power, solar power, wood burning, and it's completely sustainable. It's a fantastic vision. Now, we can't do that everywhere, but we're doing a lot to put our house in order. But we can also offer something else, something special and unique. And that's the chance to show the nation that we can all do something about this. Because, after all, what are we but a fellow homeowner and a fellow gardener? If we can put light bulbs in our properties, you can put them in at home. If we can do green gardening, you can at home. And we can give our visitors practical ideas that they can take home and apply. And I think it's because of that sense both of our involvement in green issues, but also our face-to-face contacts with millions of people. I think that's why the Prime Minister asked me, along with Ian Cheshire, who's the CEO of Kingfisher, to advise him on mobilising people on the issue of climate change. Now, we've been working away, we've got a great proposition, and we're working with a small group of people to develop it. And in a sense, it's an invisible three-way contract of action between the government, between business and civil society. And its purpose is to make changing behaviour easy, exciting, possible and engaging for people, so that they're not being lectured at, but they're being caught up in the sense of opportunity. And if you'd like to hear more about it, please let me know. But above all, though, I think we want to engage people in the new thinking about how we care for our infinitely beautiful, infinitely fragile planet. Our relationship, if you like, with the house and garden that the whole of the human species inhabits. And that phrase, climate change, is so kind of clunky. It feels a very narrow concept, a utilitarian phrase. I'm talking about something bigger, something about a new and more intimate understanding of how we relate, both to the planet, but perhaps even more to each other and to the places that we live in. And that's how important that is to our well-being, our physical well-being, yes, but our psychological and our spiritual well-being as well. So how we run our homes, the food we eat, how we travel about, how we manage our waste, all these things are absolutely relevant and fundamental to that issue. And as I say, we need to make the right choices as simple and easy for people as possible. That is hugely challenging for an organisation like the National Trust, and I'm willing to bet it's hugely challenging a prospect for all of you in this room too. So I kind of want to end with a challenge. You know, are we all doing enough? Most of us have grown up in a world where each generation has just consumed more than the last, where resources appeared infinite, and where we assumed that the future was going to be like the past, but with more stuff. Now, I don't think we can think like that any longer. We're not, however, starting from scratch. Business, trade and commerce, often caricatured as the bad guys. Actually, that's nonsense. You and we have a long and honourable tradition of creativity, of philanthropy, of innovation when it comes to thinking about the quality of our natural, our cultural and our physical environment. Think of the great Victorian buildings like Manchester's Free Trade Hall or St Pancras Station. Think of the fantastic industrial communities of Port Sunlight and Cadbury's Bourneville. They were all created by far-sighted people with a commitment to the long-term future as well as to the present. So I wonder whether we're thinking enough about our long-term legacy today. In a century's time, and just think of the change we've heard about this morning, much of what we do and the way we do it will have been rendered redundant by the march of technology. But will what we've created and left behind, buildings, landscapes, infrastructure, Will they draw the admiration of future generations? And will our social philosophies, the way we live, the way we use our planet's finite and precious resources, will they demonstrate our commitment to the long term, to the sustainability of our lives, and not just the next quarter's figures? Now, I hope that some of you in this room will confidently say, yeah, that's exactly how we think. But I wonder whether enough of us are thinking along these lines. So that's what I mean by a business plus, which I rather arrogantly said the National Trust was when I came into the room. It's a business plus is a business that not only works now, but works for the long term, delivering something the nation really needs and will value forever, a public benefit that transcends commercial success. Now, we're grappling with this now, and we'd love to work with any business who wants to make that imaginative leap, thinking not just for profit, but for the whole of society's benefit into the future. Because we are facing a different future, not necessarily a worse one, but one where we may need to value different things. The quality of life rather than how much we consume. And one where we learn again to love what's local, familiar, and precious and distinctive, rather than rushing around the world ever further and ever faster in search of something new. Now, the science and the Stern report and all of those formal indicators tell us we have something like 15 years to set ourselves on a new trajectory. And there's many people, including many of you in this room today, that are responsible for bigger decisions than I am. But what gets me out of bed in the morning is that the feeling that at the National Trust we are making a difference, however small, and we're carrying forward that burning zeal of our founders in ways that I hope would make them proud. Octavia Hill once said, "New occasions teach new duties. If ever there was a challenge we must rise to, it's to learn those new duties and inspire people to help us fulfill our collective promise to the future." Thank you.